On the Modern Motherhood podcast, I can't wait for you to meet my new friend. This is Monica Lorenzo. And, I have to say, Monica, first of all, I want to know about you. And then I want to talk to you about one of the top questions I get, both as a mom, as a podcaster, as a writer. So first of all, Monica, tell us about yourself, where you are, and what you do.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Lorenzo, and I am a certified athletic trainer based out of New York City. And just a little tidbit about what athletic trainers are. We are sports medicine healthcare professionals, and athletic trainers have to attend a full university programs that are accredited. And once you graduate from that program, just like any other medical program, you then have to sit for a board exam. And then we are state licensed to practice in our local states. So that is what we do. And my specialty happens to be working with performing artists as well as your general athletic population.
And this leads right into what I was going to tell you is probably one of the top queries that I get from moms, whether that's just moms in my world where we just all know each other and hang out, or that's moms in my broader community here with All Mom Does and on the podcast. And that is this question about kids and extracurricular activities and sports and all the things. I just feel like parents want to do this well, but there are so many competing messages about what our kids should be in and how much they should be in and how complex. Now, in my case, my kids have all played a variety of gymnastics and soccer and all the things, but a lot of my kids really, landed in dance, which happens to be one of your areas of expertise, which is awesome.
It is.
Yeah, it's awesome. But give me an overall understanding of how athletic trainers really view this topic when it comes to children and sports and performance sport.
Absolutely. I also actually work in a middle school and high school setting. So we do work with the youth population. And recently the National Athletic Trainers Association released a recommendation for sports specialization for youth athletes. And it's really targeting right into this topic that you're asking me about. And so absolutely, children should be exposed to an array of different sports, extracurricular activities, get them moving every single day. It's important, obviously, for their physicality, but also for the neurology of their brain. It's important to have them exposed outside, moving, interacting in a movement type of setting, because that neurologically forms better pathways in your brain, allows them to be more well-rounded, and they can actually absorb more information when they're in the classroom on top of just their sport that they're training for, let's say. But you really do, like you said, your children had an array of different types of sports. That's where you want to start. You want to expose your children to multiple different types of activities. And it doesn't have to be 5 activities in one day. It can be a rotation of a seasonal style activity, but there should be a rotation. And as well as having a rotation during the week. So if the kids are interested in 2 different things, that's great. But if we can now, change that up between like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then having maybe those 2 extra things on like a Saturday or a Sunday or a Tuesday that don't take up 6 hours out of their evening, but maybe 1 to 2, then that's completely healthy. You also have to obviously stay in tune to your own child and see where they're at. Are they really enjoying it? Are they coming home completely exhausted? If they're in their, older years, middle school, high school years, there's hours and hours of homework tacked onto that. So it's a matter of just really staying in tune with your child and opening up that conversation with them and checking in with how they're feeling physically, mentally, emotionally. You'll notice, do they have that brain fog? Are they getting repetitive stress injuries? Consistently getting strains in their muscles, or maybe consistently rolling their ankles? Then that's obviously another sign that they're overdoing it. So you may need to scale back on that pattern.
Monica, I think one thing that's difficult for parents is, let's face it, all of us have a little bit of a dream of what it would be like to have a kid compete at the Olympic level or be able 100%. To go for that huge, scholarship from that primo college or whatever the thing. So I think a lot of parents feel a lot of pressure early on for their children to specialize. Because I got to say, when I go and I read some of the biographies or memoirs of some of these, super athletes out there, it's like, oh yeah, by the time he was 2, he was swinging a golf club and we just never stayed off course. We just stayed on it. But talk to me about the realities of that for the rest of the population. I mean, we both know that the stats are really small for people to go pro in some of these areas, not to kill anybody's dream, but just say,
no, it really is.
So how do we withstand some of the pressure that we may feel from coaches who are well-meaning, but who want our kids to be so focused in so young on a particular sport or activity?
So that focus is not necessary in those earlier stages and even in the later stages in life. So that new release of information from the National Athletic Trainers Association has all of these actually little quotes from athletic trainers and therapists that are working with pro athletes. And all of those pro athletes participated in a variety of sports growing up. You have to have a variety of sports because that is now challenging your body in different ways. So it's called cross training.
Right.
My take home message is cross training.
Right.
So when I speak to especially performers, because I too was a dancer growing up my entire life, I did try some other sports, but like your children, fell into dance completely. And that's really where I spent many years competitively. I went to performing arts high school as well. But then I also challenged myself with other different styles of movement, yoga, Pilates. I also got into a little bit of running at one point in time. And strength training is really my big take home message when it comes to cross training for different athletics, because that's challenging the physicality of the body. It's also challenging your brain. It's challenging your mental capacity to take in new information. And it also neurologically sends new patterning from your brain to your muscles. So your child will actually be more acute at their specific sport that they're training for when they're doing other types of activities and other types of movements. So you want that mix and match. And it really is. There's only about like a 2% chance that you're going to get that college scholarship to that, that full ride to be an athlete in college. It's really just about a 2% chance. And that's a low percentage. So if you're then going to drive your child and they're going to be on their field or on their court 7 days a week, multiple, up to sometimes 40 hours a week almost, when you see some of these intense sporting events, they're on their school team, then they're on their travel team, and then they're on, the other team.
And
Exactly. And so all of that starts to add up, and that's mentally going to break down this athlete as well. They're going to be burnt out by the time they get to high school. So we can't even think about college. So it's important to have that variety. You're not taking away from them at all. And you can also now challenge that as well. Let's say that they want to play a fall sport of soccer, but their really main sport is basketball. So if they choose soccer, which has a lot of cardiovascular running up and down the field, that's great. Then on the weekends, they can work on more sport-specific movements with their basketball training. So they can do skill work like shooting. That's not super intense in physicality as far as, running the body and elevating the heart rate and pounding, but you can still work on some skill work. You're still getting all of that agility and skill work while you're playing that soccer at the same time. That's going to translate into your basketball. So it all translates. It doesn't have to be so laser focused. And it's also now going to build a much better, stronger body that's more equipped for changes and challenges. And you can actually reduce further injury in the future
by all that great cross training. Now, riddle me this. When do you think, as an athletic trainer, is the right age to start getting children into some of these physically centered activities? Because I hear all notion of recommended ages to get kids into organized sports and organized athletics. So what is your heartbeat on that?
I think they can start as young, as 4 years old in those T-ball, group athletics. That's completely fine. That's a social environment. They're learning some physical acuity skills. They're learning their hand-eye coordination, but it should be for fun. And it's also getting them to enjoy exactly what they're doing and to enjoy different types of sports. And that's where they actually start to choose what they like and what they gravitate towards as well. And so then obviously when you get into once they start that lower school, so about 5th grade, 6th grade, is where you can start to kind of more intensely have them training into those team style settings. So it's okay to get them physically active early on. If you know your child that they can pay attention and that they want to be in these organized sports settings, and then it's also good to kind of introduce them, moms on the sideline, and they can run off at that young age. I mean, I was teaching dance to 2 and 3 year olds for so many years, and that's completely fine. And that's like a once a week type of a thing. So that's okay. Once you get into those later, like lower school, like 5th, 6th grade, like I said, that's when it starts to become a little bit more intense, and it's safe for them to participate in a few hours a week, even if it's like a 5-day a week, sometimes after school program. That's totally safe, but making sure then that's really it. So you don't want to now tack on another travel team until, they're up in that like the 8th grade and then into the high school years is when they can handle more of a heavier load.
Right. Physiologically, they can do that, and psychologically, because it is a lot of pressure. Yeah, it can be a lot of pressure. Now, I'm going to have some listeners who say, Look, I would love to have my children in some kind of organized sport or activity that really keeps them active. But from the budget standpoint, from the finance standpoint, we're just not in a place to do that. What are
Hmm.
some ways that kids can get to experience some of this without mom and dad, just decimating the family budget? What are some
Yeah,
options for people who say, we really can't afford to do the whole baseball thing with the uniforms and all the cost and travel and everything that would be
absolutely.
implicit in that?
I'm sure local communities have all different types of parks and recreation programming. So I think looking into your local programming, if you live near a park, like just get out there and play. The kids are going to make friends on those fields and on those courts, and they can actually do a pickup basketball game if they would like. Just allowing them to go into an environment that has some type of movement and an outdoor space and just let them run free. They're going to find their mojo and they're going to find their zone. But like I said, the sports recreation, I think a lot of parks and local communities do have some type of free sport recreational activity that they can participate in. And then obviously your school, check into your school setting and see if they have any type of sports that don't require that extra tack on of a travel team, let's say. And then also looking sometimes in local funding in your schools, they may have some grants that they can afford to help out each student.
Right. Now, I want to make sure that I'm really clear on the difference
Yeah.
between an athletic trainer, a personal
Yes.
trainer, a fitness
Yes.
trainer, a coach, a dance teacher, because sometimes I think parents are looking to the person that they've hired at the dance school or, the tennis coach they've hired for their kid. And we have to understand that there can be great skill sets within those people, but the
Yes.
specificity of someone who is an athletic trainer is different. So, talk
Yes.
to me about the value of having an athletic trainer speak into what you're doing with your children and sort of seeing what all is going on and making sure all the parts and pieces are working well together.
Absolutely. So, athletic trainers are really crucial in any type of athletic setting. We are facilitated to evaluate an injury if an injury occurs. We also can then diagnose and rehabilitate that injury. We are liaisons and work with healthcare professionals like orthopedists, nurses, physical therapists, all types of healthcare professionals we have in our network. So we will facilitate a quick access and recovery process if, let's say, your child does get injured. The beauty also of athletic training is we really work in prevention of injury. My specialty and what I really focus a lot of my work on is prevention of injury. And one way that I do this is I do assessments. So we'll do physical assessments where I check musculoskeletal alignment, power, strength, flexibility. And this is what we do with our performers. And then from there, once we find all these little bits and pieces, we usually find some red flags that may predispose these children to injury. And so through that, we then give them strength and conditioning programs to correct any type of dysfunctions that may predispose them to injury. The other beauty about athletic trainers is that we know a lot about the recovery phase.
Right.
So it's a big issue, especially with all of the sports specialization, is these kids will then play their sport, play their sport, play their sport. There's no recovery scheduled into their day and into their week. And then the coaches also don't tack that on usually to the end of their practices. And then the kids are just, think about it, moms, can we really put our car into park without actually, breaking all of the way? No. So why do we feel like we can do that with our bodies instead of cooling down and starting that recovery process? So something that athletic trainers can really facilitate is a proper warm up, a proper balance of how much they're outputting in their actual classes, and then the cool down post and recovery phase afterwards. So do you want me to kind of tap into that a little bit?
No, I love that. And one thing that you said that I'm really keen off of is this perspective that you're bringing to the table, talking about injury prevention. And
Oh
here's why
yeah.
that's really interesting to me, Monica, because, with my own kids, with my friends' kids, I've seen us go into environments where it was the most winning coach of blah, 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 or, the dance instructor who gets the most trophies at
Yep.
competitions or
Petition.
whatever. And yet you can see these cycles of injuries that are very similar amongst a lot of the participants. And I think that we have to educate ourselves as parents that there can be people that supposedly are coaching and leading kids at a high level, but their
Correct.
focus is not injury prevention. Their focus may be on whatever that accolade is that makes them look good. And I think that people can have a great heart toward kids. I'm not saying that this is the only thing that's in there, but a lot
I
of parents
agree.
evaluate. It's like, well, if I'm going to put my kid in competitive whatever, I want them to win. But you may be dealing with someone who their focus is not injury prevention. So
No.
how can parents make sure they're getting their kids, not that a coach has to be an athletic trainer or have all that
Hmm.
knowledge, but how can we make sure we're putting our kids with the right people who
Hmm.
have at heart that our kids can be lifelong participants in
Yes.
physical activity and athletics instead of just a season where maybe they burn real bright, but also blow out their hip?
Exactly. I think it's assessing the coach or your teacher as well. So you want to make sure when you're assessing these individuals that they are providing your students with, or children, I should say, with a warm up and then a cool down. Also, conversation. So you want to
Mm,
make sure that they're stretching. Also, if your child is showing up one day with really sore hamstrings and they need, the parent can then educate the student to then speak to their coach and saying, I've been having some deep soreness in my hamstrings or my quads, for instance. And today I'm going to go about 50% because I'm not really feeling like I can jump completely high and I don't really want to injure myself. So having the conversation and checking in with your child and then checking in with the coach and the coach and the instructor or the teacher, whoever it is, and letting them know that today we're going to scale back a little bit because we're residually feeling some soreness and she can't output or he can't output 100% of their energy. The coach or dance teacher or teacher should be okay with that. If
mm.
you're getting pushback from that, then that's a red flag. Does that make sense? So
No, I
you
think
want to
that's so
have that
good. Yeah.
conversation, and
Right.
just also the parent can have that conversation, and talking about recovery when it comes to that coach, or even just also knowing, hey, we've had a really hard week. We're not going to practice today, and we're going to stay home and have a recovery day and go for a long walk or do some stretching and some foam rolling at home. And if the coach or teacher and performer, can understand that, then you have someone really good on your side.
That's so great to hear you say that from a professional's perspective of an athletic trainer, because a lot of times parents will encounter a coach or an instructor who part of what I think they're trying to do is instill, hey, we don't flake out and it's part of my job to
Yeah,
push you hard. But I have definitely seen parents, I myself have experienced coaches that it's too much. It is saying, I don't care if you've got a cold or a pulled hamstring. If you're not here for thus and such practice, you will not play the next 2 weeks. And, it's
it's
almost setting us up.
psychologically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's setting up to teach someone in an unhealthy way to ignore the signals the body is giving, saying, hey, this may be a little too much. Now, can we all use being pushed a little bit more from time to time? Sure. But I'm
Right.
so glad to hear you clarify for parents and give parents permission to say, you know
Yes.
what?
It's too
Sometimes
much.
it's too much. In one of my books called Raising an Original, I have a chapter that in which I address sometimes you got to fire the coach because
Yeah.
if that person is not there for the well-being of your child, then you need to know that and you need to get out. And so I'm really glad to hear you say that. Now,
Absolutely.
talk to me about how you, as a professional, want to see kids and want to see moms and dads really come to a place where participation in athletics, in sports, in training is something for the family, something that can extend beyond just those nascent years of being in, elementary and middle school and high school. How do
Mhm.
we make sure that we are showing our kids how to make that part of our lives on and forward, not just during those times of athletics, organized athletics like we see in our culture in the US.
Yeah, I think it's about just being active as a family together. Is that what you're asking? Like how
Yeah,
to
yeah,
achieve that?
right.
Get out, take walks, go for jogs, go for hikes in your local area. Like just make it about walking somewhere, I think is
Mhm.
the best thing to do. And then also once you kind of get an idea of, like I said, the local parks and recreational areas, let's say your family, one of your children are kind of gravitating towards tennis or something. See if you can then, rent out the tennis court for the day, or just make sure that you can hop on the tennis court with the family. And that's also a form of like an active recovery because you're not out there uber competing. Let's
Not
say you
being
had a week
Serena,
long,
not being
or not
Venus,
being
yeah.
Serena, or let's say they've been in a week long of soccer, it's during the season and you've been in a full week long of soccer practices and games, and we have Sunday available. It's totally safe to play a light game of tennis, let's say, with our family. We're getting our heart rates up, but we're not out there beating the ground, going super crazy. That's considered an active recovery day. That's totally fine. That's
Right.
flushing out all of the stuff out of the body and then allowing for increased blood flow to occur. And that's great. As long as we stretch afterwards, then that's awesome. And hydrate.
Right. How do you determine when it's too much? And the reason I ask is this. I remember back when I was a kid and I had gymnastics once a week, and I was on a team, but I had it once a week. My brothers both played soccer. They would have one practice a week and then they'd have a game on Saturday. And now it feels like, to me, as a mom trying to navigate and drive everybody to all the places, it feels like it's all the time. And just the frequency of the thing is one conversation, right? Because we do have to find things that actually meet our family life and don't make us bananas. Correct. But the other piece of that conversation is, I do think that different teams, different activities require more frequency now, just in the way that they're organized. So how can we tell, not just from an injury cycle, but just in terms of impact on the family, what our kid can handle in terms of psychology and stress and homework? How can we tell when we're staying in those healthy lanes and when maybe we're veering into something that's too much, even if it seems to fit well for 3 other families that we're close to who seem to have no problem making all these practices and games?
So it's important to have open communication with you and your child, obviously, and to have weekly check-ins in their psychology and making sure that they're still enjoying what they're doing and making sure that they still can execute their schoolwork and making sure that they're enjoying getting up and going to school as well, and enjoying the other aspects of life. I think that that's number one. If you start to see a decline in their happiness and in their psychological well-being, then we need to scale back and something is too much. And that it may not be coming from the sport, but it may be coming from some other aspect of life as well. But specifically, we're talking about our sport. So if they are burnt out, then obviously that's number one. But to not get there,
right, would be the better part of it.
Would be the better part of it. So in order to prevent that, honestly, I really think that you shouldn't be exceeding more than, 3 hours of a practice about 4 times a week. So it's ideal to kind of do a 1 to 2 hour a few times a week, and that would be better. But a lot of times, like you're saying, there's increased hours and there's increased time frames attached to all of these practices and these game style settings. So really, like, more than 3 hours, just physiologically, the youth athlete can't really, number one, focus longer enough for that 3-hour period. And that's where the body then starts to break down afterwards as well. So I think assessing what the commitment is, and like you said, those multiple times, if it's an hour here, an hour there, that's really not terrible, as long as you can manage it as a family and as long as it's not psychologically bogging down you and your child.
As an athletic therapist, what are you seeing, and trainer, what are you seeing that's coming up a lot in terms of some injury cycles that should make parents pay attention? For example, I have a good friend who has 2 sons. They are playing very high level Texas football, which I'm telling you, Monica, is a whole other thing. Like,
that is a whole other thing.
Other
I know.
States. Yeah, she's got a great podcast. Her name's Kathleen Nesta. She has a great podcast called Texas Football Mom. And one of the trends that they're seeing as she's working with her sons and they're playing football at a high level and all the things is, one of the coaches was telling her recently, they're seeing a lot of spinal fractures, like hairline fractures, amongst a lot of these young guys playing football across the country. What are some things that you're starting to see that are making you pay attention, where, if you start seeing a rash of this, moms and dads, you may need to go, okay, wait a minute. What are we doing nutrition wise? What are we doing in terms of rest? So how can we evaluate some of those things?
So a lot of things that I see are the tendinitis of all different areas of the body. Tendinitis is inflammation of your tendons. A lot of times you're going to see it in the knees, like right under the kneecap. A lot of students will also have, when they're having a lot of repetitive stress and also they have a growth spurt, they acquire something called Osgood-Schlatters, where it is just overdevelopment of bone at the growth plate by the kneecap. And then that causes usually tendinitis and other types of knee and hip pain as well. I haven't seen a lot of spondies, but I don't have football on my docket right now, but I am seeing that in many other publications as well, all over the world. I'm also seeing a lot of concussions, a lot of head injuries, and that's really one
Right,
of the bigger
right.
issues as well. But the tendonitis is something that really occurs a lot, and that's from the repetitive stress. And that's something that can be completely prevented. That can be prevented with proper nutrition. So you want to make sure that you're being fueled about an hour before your play with about 20 grams of protein. So that's a palm full of protein. And then also a side of a carbohydrate, more of like a complex carb that's going to burn really well throughout the time. So even if it's like some whole wheat bread with if they need to have like a grilled chicken on there as a solid protein. Also, a quick fix, it's not always the best because it's high in sugar, but a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is always great to have a little boost of that energy. So you want to make sure that you're having that right before, an hour before, and then right afterwards, you want to make sure that you're fueling again with also that protein, because that protein is what's going to regenerate the muscle tissue. And staying hydrated, I mean, is
Right,
huge. And that's
right.
really big to reduce all of those tendonitis and those strains as well. And hydration is really easy to calculate. So you should be drinking about 2/3 of your body weight in water a day. So if I weigh 100 pounds, then I should be drinking about 67 ounces of water a day. And then the caveat is that you have to add about 10 to 15 ounces per hour of intense exercise that day. So that's your general rule of
Right.
thumb of how much we should be hydrating. Really, nothing else substitutes water other than water. So we
Yeah.
really should be making sure that we're drinking our water and not any other like fruity, sugary style drinks. As far as those Gatorades and those electrolyte balancers, you want to kind of cut those with water instead. They're kind of high in sugar. So what I will usually do is take a large bottle of that Gatorade and then split it into two water bottles, half the water, half the Gatorade. They're getting those electrolytes and that little sugar boost that they may need to reduce cramping on the sidelines if you have a cramper in your family. and, then, and that also will now help benefit and hydrate that athlete.
I do think that it's so important to bring up this whole notion of the nutrition and hydration that's required because, for some reason, we sometimes think that those things only come into play when someone's an adult or, pursuing this, whatever the activity is at this, different level. And I've
Yeah,
even
no.
laughed before watching what, I've been guilty of it. I am not pointing fingers, wanting to be the cool mom for the soccer halftime and wanting to bring the really cool snack, and
Totally.
it being some kind of big sugar bomb and kind of
Yep.
rolling my eyes at the mom who was bringing oranges. It wasn't that
Yes.
holy. but but it really is important, even if
It's
you're
very
talking
important.
pee-wee soccer or whatever, to
It
make sure that
is.
we're instilling the habit early that when you're going to be
Exactly.
engaged in intense athletic kind of exploits, whether you're 4 or 40, that nutrition and hydration plays in a really important role. And it's another place I think parents need to be savvy because there are a lot of products out there that somebody will slap the silhouette of somebody looking like they're running a marathon on it,
I
but that does
know.
not mean that it's healthy. It can be a
It
complete
doesn't.
sugar bomb. Do you see
Let's
that there's
just go
actually some
for whole
advertising
foods.
and stuff going on where, advertisers are kind of trying to target parents on certain products that really that's plain old water would be better?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at any of the commercials out there, any type of sugary drink, there's always some happy face, or even the athletes, like a lot of athletes would be sponsoring Gatorade as well. And so that doesn't have to be your first go-to, though. It really should
Right.
just be sticking to our whole foods, everyone. Just stick to your whole foods. If it's coming in a plastic package and it's been kind of frozen and looks like it's a block of something, it's not good for you
Right,
and it's
right.
processed. So you want to make sure that you're sticking to your whole foods and to your whole greens. And sometimes that takes a little bit extra of a few hours in one day, but it's something that you can freeze. Why, cutting up fruits in a fruit salad and then freezing it and then defrosting it throughout the day in their lunch bag so that they have that for the afternoon is perfectly fine. And now
Right.
they have a whole fruit that they're not actually eating, a dried fruit or a bar that you don't know what the ingredients are, from the local store right after school. So that's a much better option, is to stick to your whole foods and freeze them, throw them in the lunchbox, and those are those healthy snacks, and making sure that those water bottles, you can always then spice up your water with a squeeze of lemon, putting some cucumber in there. And that's if your athlete needs some flavor. You can also spice up their water with fruits that are totally, safe.
Right, right. So at what point as a mom, let's say I've got my kids and they're playing soccer and we're going big on soccer and all the things. At what point would it be wise for me to take a pause and do a consultation with an athletic trainer? How would I find an athletic trainer? What can I
Absolutely.
expect if I took my child to an athletic trainer? What am I looking for in that venue in terms of really making sure that we're playing smart and safe?
Yes. Well, our goal is hopefully to have athletic trainers in all school settings. So that's number one. I would check into your local school setting and see if your school actually has an athletic trainer that your student then can go see for any type of evaluation. Number one, if they're dealing with some nagging pain, the athletic trainer is fully capable of analyzing that, evaluating that, and then providing you some further steps into either further evaluation or recovery and hopefully preventing further injury of that nagging pain. The National Athletic Trainers Association, our website is nata.org. That is also a great resource to find athletic trainers in all areas of the United States. And athletic trainers also, quick Google searches sometimes in your local area. They may work alongside physical therapists in some clinics and wellness facilities. They also work alongside physicians and orthopedists as physician extenders. So you have a variety of locations that you can find a local athletic trainer. And I highly recommend working with an athletic trainer in the injury prevention method, like I said, because we can assess for any predisposition to injury, and also kind of check in with them to see, like you said, when is too much too much. If you need that athletic trainer to chime in and give you that advice, they're fully capable of doing so.
Right. Because I do think what you said about when, we're talking about kids who are growing as this is going on. And so
Yeah.
I do think those growth spurts have to come into conversation. And I mean, I think that is a really fascinating lane for parents to make sure they're staying apprised on, because you're
Mm-hmm.
not talking about somebody who's reached full maturity and is engaged in this level of activity. You're talking about somebody who is still deciding how tall they're going to be and how much taller than their mama they're
Absolutely.
going to be. So, and I think too, I think it's also important, Monica, to mention that for parents who are staying in the lane of physical fitness and doing all the things, I think one of our first go-tos, I'm a runner, and I know
Yeah.
that sometimes one of our first go-tos, if we have a challenge or we've got a knee that's bugging us or whatever, is to go straight to the orthopedist. But I think there is a lot of value in an athletic trainer being able to assess what's going on and
Absolutely.
help, because the physiology of the different sports that we continue to engage in through adulthood, to have somebody who specializes in that. Do you find that to be true, that maybe sometimes maybe our first thought should be, maybe I should get into an athletic trainer instead of like ramping this all the way up and potentially taking out the the insurance for the year?
Absolutely. I think that it's totally accessible. If you can access an athletic trainer for an initial injury, they absolutely can be your first line of defense. And then if they can assess that injury and do believe that they need further medical intervention, they'll refer you and make sure that you go see your
Right,
physician.
right, right. This is not
So
an
I
either or kind of proposition, right?
Exactly. And
Right.
so we are fully capable of assessing those musculoskeletal injuries and then letting you know, okay, maybe your running program shouldn't be 5 days a week like you've been doing this. You should be changing it up in cross training, like we talked about, and doing some
Right.
strength training
Oh,
on
Monica,
Tuesday, Thursday.
everybody keeps saying pick up the weights. And I'm like,
Pick up the weights.
I
It's
know, Monica,
so good. It's
I
really how I train my performers.
know.
I work with the Knicks City dancers and I do a strength training class with them twice a week. And we've been doing that. This is my 11th season this year. And
Wow.
over the last 11 seasons, we've been able to reduce the new injury rate by 52%.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah,
That
it's
is
pretty
incredible.
awesome. And
Yeah,
that's through assessing their
right.
predisposition to injury. But the strength training is everything because we're challenging their body, adding resistance, increasing their musculoskeletal output, and making sure that they're at their best physicality.
Right, right. And doing it through a means that is different than what they're
That's
having to do,
safe.
with all the time. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Well, Monica, I am so thankful you've been here today. I know that I'm going to have listeners who've been hanging on to your every word because, again, this is such a big topic for
It
parents because
is.
we are spending a lot of time, a lot of our finances, a lot of time in the car, sitting in parking
Mm-hmm.
lots, waiting for kids to get done with their practices. And so I
Totally.
think these things, the whole point being that we just want our kids to have developed within them the habit of getting
Mhm.
out, moving their bodies, taking good care and being good stewards of what God's given them. And so I so appreciate the work that you do and the wisdom you've shared here today. We'll make sure in our listener notes to let you find all the places that you can connect with Monica. And Monica, a lot of my listeners love Instagram. Is there a place on Instagram
Yeah.
where we can connect with you?
Absolutely. You can follow me at RomoFit, ROMOFIT. That's my Instagram handle. And another great resource is the new website called At Your Own Risk. That is where the athletic trainers talk about sports specialization. That one does not roll off the tongue easily.
Sports specialization. Sports
Sports
specialization.
specialization.
Yep.
So and it's really, that's the cornerstone of where our conversation was today. So that's another great resource for your listeners.
All right. Well, Monica Lorenzo, athletic trainer, and such a great resource. Thank you so much for all that you do to help make sure that people are able to play continuously, able to play safe.
Yeah.
And it's just great getting to know you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.